Sarah woke to the sound of her daughter whispering to the dog. The inside of the sedan had gone quiet sometime during the night, which meant the heater had finally surrendered to age and winter's indifference. Frost crept along the edges of the windshield in delicate patterns that would have been beautiful if they didn't represent the slow encroachment of something dangerous. Emma's voice drifted through the dark, solemn, and scientific. Rusty, if you breathe on my toes, they get warmer. I think it's thermodynamics. The dog, who had never met a compliment he didn't take personally, wagged his tail with enough enthusiasm to fog up what remained of the clear glass. Sarah stayed still, bones protesting the cold in the cramped position she'd held for 6 hours. This was day 47. She knew because she'd been counting, the way prisoners mark walls, except her tally lived only in her head, where Emma couldn't see it and worry. The gray light outside suggested morning in the loosest sense. Technically, dawn had arrived, but the world looked unconvinced, wrapped in that particular shade of winter bleakness that made everything feel temporary and suspect. Sarah sat up slowly, vertebrae clicking in sequence like a combination lock that refused to open. The single blanket they shared had migrated entirely to Emma's side during the night. It always did. Sarah had stopped fighting that particular battle weeks ago. Morning, she managed, voice rough with cold, and something that tasted like defeat, but couldn't be named as such because mothers didn't get to surrender. Emma peered over the back seat, eyes bright despite everything. Is it? Technically. I wouldn't brag about it. Sarah smiled despite herself. Her daughter had inherited her father's dark hair and absolutely none of his capacity for cruelty, which seemed like the universe's one merciful editing choice in an otherwise bleak story. Rusty sneezed, which all three of them had come to accept as a form of punctuation in conversations he didn't quite follow, but supported anyway. They had left the apartment 4 months ago. Left wasn't the right word. Been asked to leave. Been given notice, then another notice, then a final conversation where the landlord had apologized while still asking them to go, which somehow made it worse than if he'd just been mean about it. Bills had a way of multiplying when you looked away, even for a day. Sarah had looked away for several days in a row after the layoff, mostly because looking at them directly required acknowledging that office manager positions were now handled by software that didn't need health insurance or bathroom breaks. The first goal every morning remained the same: find warmth without becoming a problem anyone felt obligated to solve. They had a route now, refined through trial and error, and a few encounters with security guards who ranged from sympathetic to territorial. Laundromat first. The one on Fletcher Avenue had washing machines that Emma called spaceships, and the elderly woman who ran the place had stopped asking questions 3 weeks ago, which counted as blessing enough. By 9, they sat near the dryers while Rusty pretended the floor tiles were fascinating. Sarah held a paper cup of vending machine coffee that tasted faintly metallic, like it had been brewed through spare parts, but it was hot, and that elevated it to luxury status. Emma had her library book, something about marine biology that she'd already read twice but kept checking out again because the librarian never commented on it. The radio near the folding table played the weather report in a tone so cheerful it felt like mockery. Temperatures dropping to 15 degrees tonight. Possibility of record lows. Stay indoors if possible, folks. Sarah laughed quietly. Right. She'd mentioned that to the car. Emma traced patterns in the condensation on the window. Your eyebrow is doing the thing. What thing? The worried thing, the planning thing. Sarah hadn't realized her face had tells that obvious, but 9-year-olds missed nothing, especially when their survival hinged on reading adult moods. She took another sip of terrible coffee and tried to remember where she'd seen the flyer. Last week, maybe the week before. Taped to a lamppost outside the grocery store where she sometimes bought the dented cans that got marked down to prices she could almost justify. Municipal auction, surplus vehicles and equipment. At the time, she dismissed it as irrelevant. What did she need with city cast-offs when she could barely afford gas? But something about it tugged at her now, persistent as a dog with a rope toy. The auction was today, Saturday morning. 10 o'clock at the old maintenance yard on Industrial Boulevard. We're going somewhere, Emma said, reading her mother's face like a book she'd memorized. Maybe. Probably a waste of time. Or maybe not. Sarah looked at her daughter, this small person who kept finding reasons for optimism in a situation that offered approximately none. Or maybe not, she echoed. and Rusty thumped his tail against the floor as if voting in favor. The maintenance yard sprawled across 3 acres of cracked asphalt and chain-link fence. Snow had drifted into the corners and along the edges of decommissioned vehicles in a way that made everything look like it was slowly being erased. People moved through the rows with clipboards and measuring tapes, nodding at each other with the confidence of those who knew what they were looking at and could afford to buy it. Sarah held Emma's hand. Rusty connected to them by a leash that had frayed to the point of being more suggestion than restraint. They walked past snowplows that looked like they'd been in service since the invention of winter, past vans that bore the scars of municipal duty, dented and scraped and painted that particular shade of white that announced civic ownership from 100 yards away. Then she saw it. At the far edge of the lot, almost hiding behind 2 retired fire trucks, stood something enormous. A vehicle that didn't quite fit any category she recognized. Long and rounded, like someone had taken a bus and convinced it to relax. The paint had faded to a color between cream and resignation, but the shape remained oddly elegant. A decal on the side read Urban Resilience Unit. Model Beta in lettering that had survived better than the paint. Someone had drawn a smiley face next to the word Beta, which didn't inspire confidence, but did suggest whoever had worked on this thing had possessed a sense of humor about it. Emma stopped walking. "Mom, I see it." Rusty tilted his head in that way he had when processing new information, ears doing complicated calculations. A placard hung from the side mirror on a zip tie. Someone had typed the description on what looked like an actual typewriter, which suggested this vehicle had been forgotten by everyone except whoever handled the surplus inventory. Large electric vehicle, condition unknown, batteries included, entry at your own risk. Sarah approached slowly, aware of how they must look. Woman in a coat that had seen better seasons, child with boots that were half a size too small, dog whose optimism exceeded his grooming. The kind of people who didn't belong at auctions because people at auctions had money to spend on things they didn't strictly need. "Planning to bid on that?" The voice came from behind her. Sarah turned to find a man in an expensive coat, the kind that had been purchased for both warmth and status, achieving both effortlessly. He was 50-ish, with the look of someone who'd spent his life being listened to and had stopped noticing whether people were listening out of respect or fear. "Maybe," Sarah said, defaulting to noncommittal. He gestured at the massive vehicle with a coffee cup that probably cost more than she'd spent on groceries in a month. "You know that thing probably doesn't work, right? Been sitting in storage for who knows how long. Probably cost more to tow it than it's worth." Emma's hand tightened in Sarah's. The man noticed, smiled in a way that wasn't quite friendly, but wasn't actively hostile either. "Hey, it's your money, but might want to look at the smaller items. More practical." He nodded toward a row of bicycles and office chairs before walking away, already dismissing them from whatever mental calculation he had been running. Sarah watched him go. Rusty growled softly, which he only did when he'd decided someone had failed an invisible test. "I don't like him," Emma whispered. "Neither does the dog." "Are we still bidding?" Sarah looked at the vehicle again, at the smiley face someone had drawn years ago, at the promise of enclosed space and the possibility of something better than the sedan's cramped quarters and dying heater. She pulled the folded bills from her pocket. $400, half of everything they had left. The smart choice would be to save it. The smart choice would be to walk away. But smart choices had gotten her exactly here, and here wasn't working. "Yeah," she said, "we're bidding." The auction moved efficiently, each lot announced and sold with a speed that has suggested everyone involved wanted to finish before the cold settled in permanently. The auctioneer wore fingerless gloves and consulted a clipboard that looked older than some of the equipment being sold. When they reached the large electric vehicle, a ripple of amusement moved through the small crowd. Someone laughed outright. A contractor in a tool belt stage whispered to his friend, "Refrigerator with wheels. I'll give you $10 to try and start it." The auctioneer seemed unimpressed by the commentary. "Urban Resilience Unit, sold as is, no guarantees, no warranties. Do I hear 200? Silence. Someone coughed. The man in the expensive coat stood near the back, smirking at his phone. $200, the auctioneer repeated. voice carrying the weight of someone who'd done this too many times to care whether anyone bid or not. Sarah raised her hand. 200. Heads turned. The contractor nudged his friend. The auctioneer nodded without expression. 200. Do I hear 250? Another man, younger, wearing a company jacket, raised his hand. 250. Sarah's heart kicked harder. 300. The young man shrugged and dropped out immediately, apparently having reached the limit of his curiosity. The auctioneer scanned the crowd. 300 going once. Emma tugged Sarah's sleeve. Mom, what if it doesn't work? Then we're $300 poorer and still living in the car. That's not very reassuring. I'm not very good at reassuring lately. 350. The new voice came from the side. Sarah turned to find an elderly man in coveralls that had been washed so many times the original color was a matter of speculation. He had the kind of face that suggested he'd seen most of what life offered and found parts of it amusing and parts of it deeply disappointing and had made peace with not always knowing which was which. Sarah's stomach dropped. She could go to 400, but that was the absolute limit. After that, they had $443 for guish and food and whatever else the universe decided to throw at them. 400, she said, voice steadier than she felt. The elderly man looked at her for a long moment. Something passed across his face, an expression she couldn't quite read. Then he turned to the auctioneer. I'll match the lady's 400, he said clearly, and I'll pay the difference from my last bid. Confusion rippled through the crowd. The auctioneer frowned. Sir, that's not. She bids 400. I pay 50 to make up my 350. That's how it works when you want someone to win. The elderly man's voice carried the kind of quiet authority that came from decades of being right about things that mattered. The man in the expensive coat had stopped looking at his phone. For a moment, something flickered across his features. Irritation, maybe, or surprise that his morning's entertainment had taken an unexpected turn. But he said nothing, just tucked the phone away and turned toward his truck. The auctioneer looked between Sarah and the elderly man, clearly calculating whether this was worth arguing about. Finally, he shrugged. 400 to the lady, sold. Sarah felt Emma's hand squeezing hers hard enough to hurt. Rusty wagged his entire back half, which was his maximum expression of joy. The elderly man approached as the crowd dispersed, most of them shaking their heads at the odd transaction they'd witnessed. Thank you, Sarah managed. I don't understand why you did that, but thank you. He smiled, and it reached his eyes in a way that suggested genuine warmth rather than pity. I know this vehicle, worked on it a long time ago. It deserves a chance, he extended a hand. Frank Garrett, retired city engineer. Sarah Mitchell, currently unemployed everything. And this is Emma, the girl added, because her mother had forgotten. Pleased to meet you both. Frank looked at the massive vehicle with something like affection. Come on, let me show you how to open it properly. These doors can be tricky. The rear hatch opened more smoothly than Sarah expected, as if it had been waiting for someone to finally ask politely. Inside, the air felt odd, not warm exactly, but not cold either. Neutral in a way that seemed almost deliberate. The space was larger than it looked from outside, with benches running along both sides and soft light strips embedded in the ceiling that weren't currently lit but looked intact. It's huge, Emma breathed. 22 feet long, 8 wide. Frank ran his hand along the wall panel with the reverence of someone greeting an old friend. We built 5 of these. Federal grant project, back in 2001. Supposed to be mobile emergency shelters, disaster response, extended power outages, that kind of thing. Sarah touched the bench. The material felt like a cross between vinyl and something more sophisticated, but not decayed. What happened to the program? Politics happened. Funding happened. By 2003, the grant got reallocated, project got canceled. Frank's voice carried the particular weariness of someone who'd watched good ideas die for bad reasons. They told us to destroy at all 5 units. But you didn't. I destroyed 4. This one, I couldn't do it. He moved to the front of the space where a control panel sat dark and silent. Someone must have found it years later, moved it here instead of scrapping it. Been waiting for the right person to come along. Immal climbed inside, Rusty scrambling up behind her with less grace but equal enthusiasm. Does it work? Frank pressed a button near the panel. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a soft chime sounded and lights flickered to life along the ceiling. The panel screen illuminated with text, System Standby, Environmental Stability Active. Sarah stared. It works. Apparently. Frank looked as surprised as she felt. These things were built tough. Batteries are probably solar supplemented, meant to last indefinitely with minimal maintenance. He tapped the screen gently. May I come in? There's something you should see. They sat on the benches while Frank showed them the basics. Climate control, lighting, the small storage compartments built into the walls. Everything felt oddly preserved, as if the vehicle had been sleeping rather than abandoned. Emma discovered that one of the benches had a cushion that folded out into a sleeping surface. Rusty discovered that the floor was comfortable and smelled like old rubber and possibilities. The people who designed this, Frank said, voice quiet, they cared about more than just engineering specs. They wanted it to feel like a place people could live, not just survive. There's a difference, right? Sarah felt something crack in her chest, not breaking exactly, more like ice beginning to thaw, painful in its own way. Why did you help me win it? Because that man in the nice coat didn't want you to have it, and I've learned to trust those instincts. Frank smiled. And because I've been watching this vehicle sit in storage for 6 years, waiting for someone who needed it. You needed it. I can't pay you back the $50 right now. Don't want it back. Consider it an investment in hope, which is severely undervalued these days. He stood, joints protesting audibly. I'll check in on you folks in a few days. Make sure everything's running properly. You've got my number from the auction paperwork. After he left, Sarah signed the transfer documents with hands that shook slightly. The clipboard worker barely glanced at her, just processed the sale, and handed over a receipt and a key fob that looked comically small for such a large vehicle. Emma bounced on her toes. Rusty attempted to help by licking everyone and everything within reach. When they finally closed the hatch and stood outside, looking at what they now officially owned, the weight of it settled over Sarah like a blanket. Not crushing, just present. Real. Mom, Emma said, we can live here. Yeah, Sarah's voice caught. I think we can. They spent the rest of the afternoon moving their possessions from the sedan to the electric vehicle. It took 3 trips, which was both depressing and liberating. Depressing because everything they owned fit in 3 garbage bags and 2 boxes. Liberating because the new space made those few things feel less like the sum total of their existence and more like the beginning of something yet to be defined. Emma arranged her books on a shelf someone had installed near one of the benches. Rusty explored every corner methodically, concluding that this ranked among the top 3 places he'd ever been, competing seriously with that park where someone had dropped an entire hot dog and the beach where seagulls existed. Sarah found herself studying the control panel, trying to decode the various buttons and displays. One button had a label that had partially worn away, but still read, Community something. She pressed it experimentally. The screen changed, showing a new message. Vehicle designed to stabilize temperatures during extended outages. Capacity adjusts automatically. Works best when used responsibly. Doors remain user-controlled. A diagram appeared showing heat distribution patterns. Not enough to change the weather outside, but enough to create what the system called a stability field within the vehicle and extending slightly beyond it. Sarah had no idea what that meant in practical terms, but the words stabilize temperatures suggested something that might save their lives tonight when the forecast promised record cold. As afternoon faded into evening, the temperature began its predicted plunge. Sarah activated the climate control system tentatively, half expecting nothing. The vehicle hummed softly, a sound so subtle she almost missed it. Then gradually the air inside shifted, not suddenly warm but no longer cold. Comfortable. Room temperature. Living room temperature. Emma pressed her hand against the wall. It feels like it's breathing. That's probably just the system cycling. But what if it is breathing? What if we bought a magic bus? Then we got a very good deal. They ate dinner from cans heated on a camp stove, sitting cross-legged on the bench bed, while Rusty supervised for falling crumbs. Outside, darkness arrived with the kind of finality that winter specialized in. Through the windows, Sarah could see the parking lot lights flickering on, casting orange pools across the empty asphalt. A few other vehicles remained scattered around, but nobody seemed to notice or care about the large electric unit in the corner. After Emma fell asleep, curled under blankets that finally seemed adequate, Sarah stayed awake. Not from anxiety this time, but from disbelief. The temperature outside had dropped to 12 degrees, according to the weather app on her dying phone. Inside the vehicle, it remained steady at 68. No heater roaring. No engine running, just the quiet hum of a system designed 2 decades ago by people who'd understood that sometimes technology should be kind before it was impressive. She found the hidden compartment by accident, running her hands along the wall panel near the control station. One section felt different, the edges too perfect, too intentional. When she pressed gently, it slid open to reveal a narrow space behind. Inside, 3 binders, a small screen that blinked gently, and several folders held together with clips that had rusted slightly but still functioned. Sarah pulled out the first binder carefully. The label read, URU5 Development Log, Dr. E. Reeves, Principal Engineer. Inside, pages of technical diagrams mixed with handwritten notes. Not the sterile language of official reports, but observations that felt human and immediate. Day 23, first successful heat cascade test. System maintained 70-degree rev for 18 hours using only ambient thermal recycling. Teams celebrated with terrible coffee and the good cookies someone's spouse sent. Science tastes better with sugar. Day 47, ran Unit 5 for 72 hours straight. 0 power loss, 0 failure. This could actually work. This could actually save people. Day 89, breakthrough in distribution algorithm. Heat reaching 200 square feet, stable zone. Jenkins said it was impossible. Jenkins owes me lunch. Day 120, committee visit today, funding review. Senator's aide asked good questions about scalability. Brennan kept asking about resale value versus humanitarian application, which seems like missing the point entirely, but politicians gonna politician. Sarah flipped forward, reading entries that grew more terse as months passed. Day 287, budget concerns. Project might not get renewal. We're so close. 5 working prototypes. All the testing complete. Why does money always matter more than what the money accomplishes? Day 312, Brennan asking strange questions about patent ownership and whether technology could be sold to private contractors. Told him that wasn't the point. He didn't seem to agree. The final entries were dated February and March 2003. Feb 15. Tensions high. Committee wants to cancel program. Won't say why. Numbers are solid. Testing exceeded expectations. Something else is happening behind closed doors. March 3rd. Program canceled effective immediately. Orders to destroy all 5 prototypes. No explanation beyond budget reallocation. 23 months of work, millions of dollars, technology that actually works, and they want it erased like it never existed. March 10th, destroyed units 1-4 per orders. Couldn't do it to Unit 5. This one's perfect. This one could keep families safe through disasters, power failures, all the scenarios we designed for. Hiding it in warehouse sublevel, Section D. Falsified destruction report. If they ever find out, I'm finished. But I can't destroy something that could save lives just because paperwork says so. The final entry was dated March 15, 2003. If anyone finds this vehicle in these logs, use it the way it was meant to be used. Keep people warm, keep them safe, keep families together. Technology should serve humanity before it impresses anyone. That was supposed to be the whole point. If you're reading this, it means the system didn't destroy everything good. That means there's still hope. Take care of Unit 5. It'll take care of you. Dr. Elena Reeves, P.S. The technology is called Heat Cascade Module. It recycles ambient thermal energy, amplifies it through phase transition dynamics I won't bore you with here. Free heating forever, essentially, if you treat the system with respect. Patent is mine personally, not the government's. I made sure of that before everything went sideways. Legally speaking, whoever owns this vehicle owns the world's only working prototype of something that could change how we help people in crisis. Use it wisely. Sarah closed the binder carefully and sat in silence. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling against the vehicle's exterior. Inside, the temperature remained stable, the hum continued its gentle rhythm, and Emma slept with her arm across Rusty's back. She had bought a vehicle at a municipal auction because she was desperate and cold and running out of options. What she'd actually acquired was a gift from a dead engineer who'd broken rules to protect something she believed in. A woman who'd looked at bureaucracy and budget politics and decided that some things mattered more than following orders. Sarah thought about the entry regarding patents and ownership, about being homeless one day and, technically speaking, the legal owner of unique technology the next. About the strange, circuitous paths that sometimes connected people across years and circumstances, linked by nothing more than shared conviction that keeping people warm shouldn't be complicated or expensive or political. The screen on the control panel flickered with a new message. System recognizes prolonged occupancy, adjusting for long-term residential stability. Welcome home. Sarah's throat tightened. She touched the screen gently, like thanking someone who couldn't hear, but might somehow know anyway. Thank you, DeReeves, she whispered to the empty air, in the quiet machine, in the sleeping child who would wake up warm for the first time in 47 days. Outside, the temperature continued dropping toward record lows. Inside, hope hummed softly, generated by circuits and intention, by engineering and defiance, by the stubborn insistence that people deserve better than what systems were willing to provide. In the morning, Sarah would start figuring out what came next. But tonight, wrapped in technology that someone had loved enough to save, she let herself believe that sometimes the universe remembered to be kind in the spaces between its cruelties. Rusty snored. Emma smiled in her sleep. The vehicle breathed its mechanical breath, and for the first time in months that felt like years, Sarah closed her eyes without counting everything they'd lost or everything that could still go wrong. Tomorrow would come regardless. Tonight, they were safe. The knock came 3 days later, cautious and apologetic, the sound of someone who didn't want to be a bother but had run out of alternatives. Sarah had been reading through more of Dr. Reeves' technical logs, trying to understand the system well enough to maintain it. Emma was drawing maps of imaginary places at the small table they'd set up. Rusty's ears went up in what passed for alert mode, though his tail immediately undermined any sense of threat by wagging. Sarah opened the door to find a man in his late 60s wrapped in 3 scarves of different colors and lengths, layered with the desperate creativity of someone who'd stopped caring how it looked and started caring only whether it worked. His eyes held that particular kind of exhaustion that came from fighting cold for too long. "I'm sorry to bother you. I noticed it looks warm inside." The words came out rushed, embarrassed. Sarah recognized the tone. She'd used it herself in bathroom mirrors at gas stations, apologizing to her own reflection for still existing in spaces where people expected you to have purchased something. She stepped aside without thinking about it too hard. "Come in." He hesitated at the threshold, hand on the frame. "I don't want to impose." "You're not. It's cold. Come in." The man stepped inside and his whole body seemed to exhale. The relief was immediate and profound, visible in the way his shoulders dropped and his jaw unclenched. He closed his eyes for a moment, and Sarah recognized that expression too. The moment when your body remembered what comfort felt like after deciding to forget as a survival mechanism. "Thank you. My fingers were starting to forget they worked for me." He opened his eyes, smiled with genuine warmth. "I'm Walter Henley, retired teacher. Sarah Mitchell, currently between addresses. And I'm Emma," her daughter added, because introductions mattered even when circumstances didn't. Walter settled onto one of the benches, carefully as if testing whether he was really allowed. Rusty immediately positioned himself against Walter's legs, offering comfort through proximity and the subtle threat of drool. They sat together for perhaps 20 minutes, mostly quiet. Not the awkward silence of strangers forcing conversation, but the comfortable quiet of people simply grateful to exist in the same warm space. When Walter stood to leave, he grasped Sarah's hand gently. "What you've got here, it's more than a vehicle. It's something rare. It's just warm. Warmth is never just warmth when you don't have it." He pulled a worn business card from his wallet. "If you need anything at all, former teachers have unexpected networks." After he left, Sarah looked at Emma. "We should probably talk about this." "About helping people?" about whether we can help people without attracting the wrong kind of attention. Emma considered this with the seriousness she applied to everything. Dr. Reeves wanted the vehicle used to help families. We're doing that. Dr. Reeves also hid this thing from the government. Because the government was being stupid. That doesn't mean we have to be. Sarah found herself smiling despite the anxiety that had taken up permanent residence in her chest. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise, you just started listening. Word moved through the cold streets the way rumors do, carried by people who knew other people who knew someone who'd heard. The warm bus, they called it, though Sarah tried explaining repeatedly that it wasn't a bus in any traditional sense. But the name stuck with the stubborn affection people gave to things that helped them survive. Over the next week, a pattern emerged. Someone would appear, hesitant and apologetic, usually during the coldest parts of morning or evening. Sarah would let them in. They would sit and thaw. Sometimes they talked, sharing pieces of their stories. Sometimes they just sat. Either way, they left looking more human than when they had arrived. A college student named Marcus showed up on day 5, laptop under his arm and desperation in his eyes. My dorm's heating system is apparently experimental. Experiments keep failing. He stayed for 3 hours working on an essay about economic theory while occasionally looking around like he couldn't quite believe this space existed. Before he left, he brought back sandwiches from the campus cafeteria, wrapped carefully and still warm. A young mother arrived on day 7 with twin toddlers who'd been crying from the cold until they stepped inside. The babies fell asleep almost immediately on the bench, curled together like quotation marks around their mother's gratitude. Sarah covered them with blankets and pretended not to notice the woman crying quietly into her hands. Frank stopped by every other day, ostensibly to check the systems, but mostly Sarah suspected to make sure they hadn't been discovered by the wrong people. He showed Emma how the electrical panels worked, explaining renewable energy in terms simple enough to understand but complex enough to respect her intelligence. He brought Rusty dog treats that were probably too expensive, but which Rusty accepted as his rightful due. On day 9, Emma created what she called the welcome station. 2 folded blankets for sitting, a box of mismatched mugs she'd found at a thrift store, and a handwritten sign that read, "You're safe here. Please sit. Rusty is friendly." She decorated it with drawings of stars and something that might have been a spaceship or a very optimistic interpretation of their vehicle. Rusty positioned himself beside the sign like a deputy at a frontier outpost, accepting his role with the gravity of someone finally receiving recognition for years of underappreciated service. By the end of the 2nd week, Sarah stopped counting visitors, not because there were too many, but because numbers seemed to miss the point. Each person who came carried their own weight of exhaustion and need. Each person who left carried slightly less. The mathematics of that didn't fit on any spreadsheet she could imagine. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon while Emma was at school and Sarah was attempting to organize their supplies into something resembling system rather than chaos, a woman arrived in a practical coat with a clipboard. Clipboard people had historically meant problems. Clipboard people had delivered eviction notices and job termination letters and questions about why Emma wasn't in school on days when she'd been too cold to focus. Sarah's entire body tensed. The woman stepped inside after Sarah's reluctant invitation, looked around slowly, and then did something unexpected. She closed her eyes and just breathed. After a moment, she spoke quietly. "This is lovely." Emma, returned from school and doing homework at the table, whispered to Sarah, "Clipboard person has feelings, unexpected development, expected." The woman opened her eyes and smiled. "I'm Lisa Brennan. I work with the city's community outreach program. People keep telling me there's a vehicle here that acts like it has a personality." Sarah chose her words carefully. "I'm not sure about personality, but it keeps us warm." "May I?" Lisa gestured to the bench. They sat while Lisa explained that her job involved finding creative solutions to problems the city didn't have budget to solve conventionally. She'd heard about the warm bus from 3 different people in 2 days. Not complaints, recommendations. "I'm not here to shut anything down," Lisa said firmly. "I'm here to understand it. And if it's helping people, I want to make sure it can keep helping people." Sarah found herself explaining the auction, Frank's help, the discovery of Dr. Reeves' logs, The decision to share what they had instead of hoarding it. The careful balance of trying to help without becoming a target. Lisa listened without interrupting, taking occasional notes that seemed more thoughtful than official. When Sarah finished, Lisa nodded slowly. At minimum, this is working. The city isn't great at turning away things that work. She stood. I'll check in regularly, not to inspect, to help. There's a difference. That evening she returned with a bowl of tea bags, one package labeled, very calming, which Emma treated like sacred treasure, insisting they save it for emergencies defined by criteria only she understood. The weather turned colder, not gradually, but with the spiteful determination of a winter that had read its own press and decided to live up to expectations. Temperatures stayed below 20 for 5 straight days. The vehicle hummed steadily, maintaining its interior climate with the quiet competence Dr. Reeves had engineered into every circuit. But on the 6th day, Sarah noticed something different. The hum had changed. Not dramatically, but enough to register as wrong. The tone shifted higher, taking on an edge that suggested strain rather than ease. She checked the control panel, temperature still stable, all indicators green. But the sound persisted, a mechanical voice saying something was different, even if the numbers claimed otherwise. Frank arrived for his regular check to find Sarah staring at the panel like she could decode its secrets through intensity of focus alone. What's wrong? Listen. He stopped, head tilted. After a moment, his expression shifted. That's not good. What does it mean? Means the system's working harder than it's designed to. It's compensating, but compensation has limits. He pulled out a tablet, connecting it to a port Sarah hadn't noticed under the main panel. Data scrolled across the screen in ways that meant nothing to her, but apparently told Frank everything he needed to know. You're running this continuously. 24 hours a day for what? 3 weeks now? People need it. I understand that, but it wasn't designed for constant operation. It was meant for emergency use. Days, not weeks. Definitely not indefinite. He showed her the screen. See these temperature differentials? Systems having to work progressively harder to maintain stability. Eventually, something's going to give. Sarah's chest tightened. How long? Could be days, could be weeks, could fail suddenly or gradually. Engineering isn't fortune-telling. He met her eyes. You need to reduce usage. Let the system rest, or risk losing it completely. The decision felt impossible. Tell people they couldn't come? Ration warmth like it was a commodity instead of a basic human requirement? But letting the system fail meant helping no one, including Emma. That evening, Sarah addressed the small group that had gathered. Walter, the college student Marcus, the young mother whose twins were sleeping peacefully on a bench, 3 others who'd become regulars. She explained the situation as clearly as she could. The system needed rest. They'd have to limit hours, reduce occupancy, find a balance between helping and surviving. Most people understood, nodded, said they'd manage. But one man, someone Sarah didn't recognize who'd shown up 2 days ago and stayed longer than anyone else, stood abruptly. So you're rationing kindness now? Deciding who deserves warmth and who doesn't? I'm trying to keep the system working so it can help anyone at all. Sounds like excuses people with resources make when they don't want to share. He left, door slamming hard enough to rattle the windows. In the silence that followed, Walter spoke quietly. He's scared. Fear makes people unfair. Sarah sat down heavily. Emma climbed onto the bench beside her, pressing close. Rusty put his head on Sarah's knee with the solemnity of someone offering condolences at a funeral. We'll figure it out, Emma said. We always do. Sarah wanted to believe that, wanted to trust that solutions appeared when needed. But exhaustion made optimism difficult, and the vehicle's strained hum provided constant reminder that generosity had mechanical limits. Frank returned the next morning with Marcus Wade, who Frank introduced as the current city infrastructure manager. Marcus had the tired eyes of someone fighting bureaucracy while trying to fix things that mattered, a battle that rarely went well for the things that mattered. Marcus spent an hour examining the system, asking questions that demonstrated both technical knowledge and genuine concern. When he finished, he sat across from Sarah with the expression of someone about to deliver news that wasn't simple enough to call good or bad. This technology is remarkable. Reeves was apparently a genius who got buried under politics. The heat cascade system is elegant, efficient, and about 20 years ahead of what most municipalities have today. He paused. It's also overworked. Frank's right. You need to either reduce usage significantly or risk permanent failure. Can you fix it? Fix? No, but I might be able to help repair it if components fail. And he glanced at Frank. I'd like to document this, with your permission. Submit findings to city engineering. If we could understand how Dr. Reeves solved the efficiency problems that plague modern heating, we could potentially replicate this for emergency shelters, low-income housing, disaster response. Sarah heard the opportunity beneath the careful words. Also heard the risk. Documentation means attention. Attention means people asking questions about how I got it and why I'm using it this way. Probably yes, but it also means potential city support, resources, maybe even repairs we can't fund privately. Marcus leaned forward. I can't promise anything. Government moves slow and often in the wrong direction. But this technology could help thousands of people if we can study and reproduce it. Isn't that what Dr. Reeves wanted? Emma, who'd been listening from her homework corner, spoke up. She wanted families kept together. She wanted people warm. Marcus nodded. Exactly. And right now, this is the only working system in existence. If we lose it, we lose the blueprint for everything else. Sarah thought about the entries in Dr. Reeves' log, the frustration with bureaucracy, the defiance in hiding the vehicle rather than destroying it. The final note? Use it wisely. Okay, document it, but I stay involved. This doesn't become city property. It stays ours. Agreed, I'll draft something formal. Partnership, not seizure. He left with promises to return, and Sarah tried not to think about how many promises had evaporated between making and keeping. But Frank's presence felt steadying, and Lisa showed up that afternoon to say she'd run interference on the political side, which Sarah didn't entirely understand but appreciated anyway. 3 days later, a local news van appeared in the parking lot. Sarah's first instinct was to hide, pretend they weren't there. But the reporter, a young woman with persistent kindness in her voice, had already spotted Emma playing with Rusty outside. Are you the family with the warm bus? I'd love to do a story. What kind of story? The good kind. People helping each other, community forming in unexpected places. We need more of those stories. The reporter smiled. I'm Jennifer. I promise I'm not here to cause problems. Against her better judgment, Sarah agreed. The interview lasted 20 minutes. Jennifer asked questions about homelessness, about how Sarah had found the vehicle, about the decision to share it with others. She filmed the interior, talked to Walter and the college student who happened to be there, got footage of Rusty accepting pets from Emma like a professional ambassador of goodwill. The story aired that evening. Sarah watched it on Jennifer's phone since they didn't have television. The segment ran 4 minutes, positioned between weather and sports. The tone was gentle, humanizing. Local mom turns surplus vehicle into community warming center. More after this. The response came in waves. First online, comments and shares multiplying faster than Sarah could track. Then practical, donations appearing at the vehicle's location. Cash in envelopes, gift cards, supplies. Strangers who'd seen the story stopped by to say thank you or bring blankets or just acknowledge that they'd noticed. But attention was a fire that warmed and burned simultaneously. Within 2 days, Sarah started seeing the other responses. Online comments questioning legality, safety, whether this was really helping or just enabling homelessness. One local politician mentioned in a radio interview that unregulated shelters posed liability concerns, though he didn't mention Sarah or the vehicle specifically. Lisa called. I saw the story. It's getting traction. I noticed. Some of it's good, some of it's complicated. Cities getting questions about permits, regulations, whether you're operating illegally. Am I? Technically, gray area. You own the vehicle. People visit you. That's legal. Running an unlicensed shelter? Less legal, but you're not running a shelter. You're living in a vehicle and being generous. The distinction matters, but it's thin. Sarah felt the walls closing incrementally. What should I do? Keep doing what you're doing. I'll handle the politics. Just be prepared. Once things get official attention, they rarely go back to being unofficial. That night, while Emma slept and Rusty snored, and the system hummed its strained hum, Sarah reread Dr. Reeves' final log entry. Use it wisely. She tried. But wisdom apparently required navigating systems more complex than thermodynamics. On day 23, Richard Hayes appeared again. Sarah saw his truck pull up, recognized him from the auction. Her stomach dropped. He got out carrying coffee, which suggested either genuine friendliness or sophisticated manipulation. She couldn't immediately tell which. Mrs. Mitchell? Could we talk? They stood outside, cold enough that breath turned visible. Richard held his coffee like it was the only thing keeping his hands functional. I saw the news story. Impressive what you're doing. Thank you. I'll be direct. I bought this lot 6 months ago. Development project, luxury condos, retail space, breaking ground in about 5 weeks. The timeline hit like cold water. 5 weeks, 35 days. Sarah's voice came out steadier than she felt. You want us gone? I need the lot cleared, yes. It's not personal. I have investors, construction contracts, 20 employees whose jobs depend on this project staying on schedule. He took a drink of coffee. I'm not the villain here. I'm just a businessman with obligations. Where do you expect us to go? I brought information about shelter programs, housing assistance, city resources. He handed her a folder that felt both helpful and dismissive. Look, I'm giving you warning now instead of serving notice. That's more than I had to do. Sarah took the folder. 5 weeks. Maybe 6 if weather delays construction. But that's the window. He met her eyes. I genuinely hope you find something. What you're doing matters. It just can't happen here. After he left, Sarah sat in the driver's seat of the vehicle, staring at nothing. Emma climbed up beside her. Are we in trouble? We're always in some kind of trouble. This is just a new variety. What do we do? I don't know yet, but we'll figure something out. Emma leaned against her mother. Dr. Reeves figured things out even when the government told her no. Dr. Reeves ended up hiding things in warehouses. But she won. The vehicle exists. We're using it. That means she won. Sarah put her arm around her daughter, this small philosopher who kept finding hope in circumstances that offered mostly desperation. Maybe Emma was right. Maybe winning meant surviving long enough to help other people survive. Maybe that was the only victory available. Frank and Lisa arrived together the next day, summoned by Sarah's panicked text. They sat around the small table while Sarah explained the deadline. 6 weeks, Frank said. That's not much. It's enough time to find alternative space, Lisa countered. I can talk to city council. There might be publicly owned lots that could work temporarily. Temporarily, Sarah repeated. We keep living temporarily until we make it permanent. Lisa pulled out her own folder, this one thicker than Richard Hayes's. Marcus and I have been working on something. Unofficial proposal. City partners with you. We provide space, utilities, official sanction. You manage the program. We study the technology, work toward replicating it. In exchange for what? Access to the system for documentation, your expertise operating it, and, Lisa hesitated. Partnership means oversight, regular reports, safety inspections, bureaucratic requirements. Sarah felt the weight of it. Freedom traded for stability. Independence exchanged for security. The math never worked out clean. Let me think about it. Over the next week, the situation evolved faster than Sarah could process. The news story got picked up by other stations. Social media amplified the narrative. Homeless mom creates warming center. Support poured in alongside criticism. Donations accumulated. So did questions from city officials about permits, liability, regulations. Then, inevitably, came the petition. Walter showed up one morning with a tablet showing an online document. We started this yesterday. Community members who've used the warm bus, people you've helped, they're asking city council to provide you with protected space. Sarah scrolled through names, many she recognized, stories attached to each signature. This woman kept my babies warm. This place saved my life during the cold snap. Sarah Mitchell represents what community should mean. By evening, 200 signatures existed. By the next morning, over 400. The petition asked formally for the city to enter partnership with Sarah, provide permanent location, and support the program as emergency community resource. Lisa called. Council is scheduling an emergency session. They're calling it Community Resilience Initiative Review. You'll need to testify. I don't know how to testify. You know how to tell the truth. That's all testimony is. The council chamber felt too large and too official, all wood paneling and procedural gravity. Sarah sat in the front row with Emma beside her and Frank behind her like a steadying hand she couldn't see but felt anyway. Rusty had been left with Lisa, deemed insufficiently formal for municipal proceedings despite his excellent character. The chamber filled slowly. Supporters clustered on one side. Walter, the college student Marcus, the young mother with her twins, others who'd found warmth and wanted to acknowledge it. On the other side, people Sarah didn't recognize. Property owners, business advocates, citizens who believed in regulations and proper procedures. Richard Hayes sat in the middle, alone, expression unreadable. The council members filed in, 7 of them, ranging from genuinely interested to performing interest for cameras. The chairwoman called the session to order with the bored efficiency of someone who'd done this too many times. Item 47C, Community Resilience Initiative. Ms. Mitchell, you're recognized. Sarah walked to the podium on legs that felt uncertain of their purpose. She'd prepared remarks, written them out at Lisa's suggestion, but looking at them now, the words seemed simultaneously too formal and too desperate. She folded the paper and spoke without it. My name is Sarah Mitchell. 4 months ago, I lost my job. 2 months after that, I lost my apartment. I made choices I'd rather not have made and ended up living in a car with my 9-year-old daughter. Her voice steadied as she went. I bought a vehicle at municipal auction because it was big enough to live in and cheap enough to afford. What I found was something one of your city engineers had hidden 20 years ago because she believed technology should help people before it impressed anyone. She told them about Dr. Reeves, about the lays in the defiance and the faith that eventually someone would use the vehicle the way it was meant to be used, about the first person who knocked asking for warmth, about the decision to share what little they had. I'm not running a business. I'm not trying to replace shelters or services. I just opened my door because I remember what it feels like when every door closes. She looked at the council members. The technology in that vehicle could help thousands of people if someone studies it, replicates it, uses it the way Dr. Reeves intended. All I'm asking is space to keep doing what we're doing while you figure out how to scale it. She sat. Emma grabbed her hand, squeezed hard. The chairwoman nodded. Mr. Hayes, you're recognized. Richard stood, moved to the podium without notes or hesitation. I respect what Ms. Mitchell has accomplished. Genuinely. But respect doesn't change property law or contractual obligations. He explained his development project, the investments, the timeline. I have no problem with this program continuing. I have a problem with it continuing on land I purchased legally and need for legitimate business purposes. The chairwoman interrupted. So you're not opposing the program itself, just at the current location? Correct. Find her alternative space within my construction timeline, and I'll even donate to the program. Marcus Wade stood. May I speak? Permission granted, he approached the podium with tablet in hand. I'm the current city infrastructure manager. I've examined Ms. Mitchell's vehicle. The heat cascade system represents breakthrough technology in energy efficiency. Dr. Reeves' work was decades ahead of its time. He showed data, efficiency charts, potential applications. If we partner with Ms. Mitchell, document this system, we could build emergency warming stations throughout the city. We could revolutionize how we respond to cold weather crises. He outlined a proposal. City provides space at community center lot. Better location, official utilities, permanent arrangement. Sarah manages daily operations. Engineering team studies the technology. Pilot program for 6 months with option to expand. This isn't about one vehicle or one family. It's about proving we can use innovation to serve people who need it most. The chairwoman called for questions. Council members asked about tests, liability, precedent. Marcus and Lisa answered with the practiced efficiency of people who'd anticipated every objection. The questions went on for 40 minutes, circling around politics and budgets and regulations until Sarah felt her attention sliding away from meaning. Finally, the chairwoman called for council vote. All in favor of approving the Community Resilience Pilot Partnership as outlined? 6 hands rose. 3 stayed down. Enough. Motion passes. Ms. Mitchell, the city will contact you within 48 hours to formalize arrangements. Mr. Hayes, we appreciate your flexibility. If there's no further business. But Sarah barely heard the rest. Emma was crying quietly, relief spilling out in ways pride couldn't contain. Frank's hand settled on Sarah's shoulder, steady and warm. Across the room, Walter caught her eye and nodded, teacher acknowledging student who'd learned something neither of them could have predicted teaching. Richard Hayes approached as people filed out. No hard feelings? None I can afford to keep. He smiled slightly. Fair enough, and I meant what I said. I'll donate to the program. Make sure you follow through. Over the following days, papers were signed. Lawyers reviewed language nobody fully understood, but everyone pretended made sense. The vehicle was relocated to a covered space at the community center, positioned near utilities and officially sanctioned. Frank supervised the move, ensuring no damage to systems Dr. Reeves had built to last. The new location felt both better and more exposed. Better because legitimate. More exposed because legitimacy meant visibility, and visibility meant accountability in ways that hiding hadn't required. Lisa helped Sarah fill out forms that seemed designed to exhaust enthusiasm through bureaucratic attrition. Marcus brought engineering students to document the heat cascade system, polite young people who treated the vehicle like a historical artifact, and Dr. Reeves like a legend. Emma decorated the new space with drawings, creating continuity between the old location and this one. Rusty approved of everything, which was his default setting for life. On their first official night at the new location, Sarah stood outside looking at the vehicle that had become less vehicle and more symbol. Behind her, the community center glowed with activity. In front of her, their home hummed with the patience of technology that had waited decades to fulfill its purpose. Frank joined her, 2 coffee cups in hand, both terrible. You did it. We're not done yet. Never said you were, but you survived the middle part. That counts. They stood in silence, watching steam rise from coffee that tasted like disappointment but felt like victory anyway. Inside, Emma called out that dinner was ready, which meant canned soup heated on their camp stove but eaten at a table in a space that couldn't be taken away by landlords or developers or systems that forgot people mattered more than paperwork. Sarah went inside. The door closed behind her. The vehicle hummed its mechanical song. And somewhere in the mathematics of thermodynamics and human resilience, Dr. Reeves' faith in future strangers proved itself correct one more time. The apartment felt wrong at first, too much space distributed in ways that made Sarah nervous about filling it correctly. 2 bedrooms, actual bedrooms, with doors that closed and walls that didn't also serve as vehicle siding. A kitchen with a stove that worked through mysterious forces called natural wine rather than camping fuel. Windows that looked out at trees instead of parking lots. Emma stood in the center of what would be her room, arms spread, turning slowly. I can't touch both walls at the same time. That's generally considered a feature. It feels too big, like I'll get lost. Rusty had no such concerns. He moved through the space claiming territory with the confidence of a conqueror who'd finally received proper real estate. The balcony particularly pleased him, offering elevated observation of a courtyard where squirrels made tactical errors. The apartment came through the city partnership, subsidized housing lottery that Lisa had somehow manipulated in their favor through bureaucratic sorcery Sarah didn't question. $62,000 per year as program director, Community Resilience Initiative. The salary felt obscene until Sarah calculated what they'd been living on and realized she'd simply forgotten what adequate looked like. Frank helped them move in, which meant carrying 3 boxes and offering commentary on door hinges. Good hardware. These'll last another 20 years. You evaluate everything by lifespan? Comes with the engineer territory. We think in decades while everyone else thinks in quarters. Lisa arrived with towels, which hadn't occurred to Sarah as necessary until she saw them. Basic inventory. City purchasing has budget for this, may as well use it. Marcus appeared that afternoon carrying folders that explained Sarah's job in bureaucratic detail that managed to be simultaneously comprehensive and incomprehensible. Her role involved managing daily operations at the vehicle, which she'd already been doing, but now with paperwork, coordinating with city services, monthly reports, safety protocols, community outreach. Sounds like government found a way to make helping people complicated. Marcus smiled without disagreement. Government excels at that, but it also means legitimate funding, insurance, legal protection, trade-offs. The official formalization happened on a Tuesday that felt deliberately ordinary. Sarah signed contracts at a city office decorated with motivational posters that mostly motivated despair. Lisa countersigned as department liaison. Marcus witnessed as technical advisor. Somewhere in the stack of papers, Sarah agreed to things she didn't fully understand but trusted weren't designed to destroy her. Frank had insisted on coming despite it being his physical therapy day. Missed too much history already, not missing this. Afterward, they ate lunch at a diner that served breakfast all day, which Emma considered proof of societal advancement. Frank ordered pancakes with the enthusiasm of someone who'd earned complex carbohydrates through decades of good behavior. Between bites, Marcus cleared his throat with the awkwardness of someone preparing to say something important sideways. There's something else. Legal thing. I had our city attorney research patent law. Sarah's coffee suddenly tasted more bitter. Why? Dr. Reeves held personal patent on the heat cascade technology, not government patent, hers specifically. We found documentation. She filed in 2001, kept it current through 2018. Okay. When she died with no heirs, patent entered probate with her estate, orphaned intellectual property. Marcus pulled out printed documents covered in legal language that transformed English into something hostile. But here's the unusual part. Ownership of the sole working prototype creates legal precedent for patent claim. You own the vehicle. The vehicle embodies the patented technology. Several attorneys I consulted think you have legitimate claim to the patent itself. The information landed oddly, too large to process in a booth that smelled like hash browns and institutional coffee. What does that mean practically? Means if we replicate this technology for city shelters, you'd potentially receive licensing fees, compensation for use of patented design. Marcus pushed the papers toward her. We're not talking fortune, but enough to matter. Maybe 30 to 40,000 annually if we build 10 stations. Sarah looked at Emma, who'd stopped eating to listen with the intensity she applied to anything involving numbers or justice. Mom, you'd get paid for helping people? Apparently that's how patents work when you're not a corporation. Frank wiped syrup from his mustache carefully. Elena would approve. She always said innovation should benefit communities, not just shareholders. This fits. Lisa added, we'd need to formalize it through proper channels. But Marcus's research is solid. You'd have claim. That evening, Sarah sat on her new balcony while Emma did homework at a real desk in her room, and Rusty supervised courtyard security. The city sprawled below, lights beginning to puncture the gathering dusk. Somewhere out there, people moved through cold streets looking for warmth. She'd been one of them 3 months ago. Now she held patent rights to technology that could help thousands. The trajectory felt impossible and inevitable simultaneously, like falling upward through fortunate accidents that weren't entirely accidents. Over the following weeks, Marcus's engineering team finalized their documentation. Sarah spent hours explaining the system's quirks, the maintenance patterns she'd developed, the way temperature fluctuations signaled stress before indicators showed problems. Frank contributed memories of the original development, details that hadn't made it into official logs. The city approved construction of 4 pilot warming stations based on Dr. Reeves' design. Not identical replicas, Marcus explained, but interpretations that honored the core innovation while adapting for permanent installation. Each station would serve 20 people comfortably, 40 in emergencies. Climate-controlled, self-sustaining, designed to run indefinitely on minimal power. One morning in early April, a woman appeared at the community center asking for Sarah by name. She was perhaps 40, dressed professionally but not expensively, carrying herself with the particular care of someone managing grief that hadn't finished its work. Ms. Mitchell, I'm Emily Reeves. Dr. Elena Reeves was my godmother. Sarah's breath caught. Emma, who'd been reading nearby, looked up sharply. Emily continued, I heard about the program, saw the news coverage. Took me a while to work up courage to visit. She smiled with sadness around its edges. Elena talked about the Resilience Project constantly. It broke her heart when they canceled it. She never stopped believing that technology mattered. They sat in the vehicle, the three of them, plus Rusty, who sensed emotional significance and offered support through strategic leaning. Emily told stories about Dr. Reeves, a woman who had spent her career fighting bureaucracy while trying to build things that help people, who'd mentored young engineers and advocated for sustainable design before it became fashionable, who died believing her best work had been destroyed. She would be so proud of this. Emily gestured at the space around them. Not just that the vehicle survived, but that it's doing exactly what she intended. I found her logs, Sarah ventured. The entries about hiding it. Emily nodded. She told me about that. Sworn to secrecy. I was 12, thought it was the most exciting thing anyone had ever trusted me with. Her voice wavered slightly. After she died, I looked for the vehicle. Thought maybe I could finish what she started. But I couldn't find it. Assumed it had been destroyed after all. Frank found it, moved it to the auction lot. Then Frank's a hero. Emily pulled an envelope from her bag. I brought something. Elena's personal journal. Not the engineering logs, her actual thoughts about the project, about why it mattered. I think you should have it. The journal was leather-bound, worn soft by years of handling. Sarah opened it carefully. The first entry dated '99, the year the Resilience Program began. Elena's handwriting slanted right with the urgency of someone trying to capture thoughts faster than hands could move. February 3rd, 1999. Accepted federal grant today. $12 million to develop mobile emergency shelters. Everyone thinks it's about disaster response. It is, but it's also about dignity. About making sure crisis doesn't strip away humanity along with comfort. That's what I want to build. Not just warm spaces, but acknowledgement that people deserve better than what emergency usually offers. Sarah read passages aloud while Emily listened with the expression of someone hearing a beloved voice through other mouths. Entries about technical challenges and bureaucratic frustrations, about team members and breakthrough moments, about growing awareness that politics cared more about optics than outcomes. One entry made Sarah stop reading aloud, absorbing it silently first. November 18, 2002. Brennan keeps pushing resale narrative. Wants to know if technology could be commercialized, sold to private sector. Doesn't understand that some innovations should serve public good without profit motive. Or maybe he understands and disagrees, which is worse. I'm worried he'll find a way to kill project if it can't be monetized. Need to protect the work somehow. Emily spoke quietly. She was right to worry. 6 months later, they canceled everything. She saved one vehicle, though. That counts for something. It counts for what's happening now, for people being warm and safe. For you sitting here instead of... Emily stopped herself. Instead of freezing in a car, Sarah finished. You can say it. We lived it. Emma had been quiet, processing the way she did when emotions ran too large for immediate words. Now she spoke. Dr. Reeves sounds like she was brave. She was, Emily confirmed. Brave and stubborn and absolutely certain that engineering should solve human problems before it solved market problems. They talked for another hour, Emily sharing memories, while Sarah took mental notes on the person behind the technical logs. Finally, Emily stood to leave. Thank you for this, for keeping her work alive. Thank you for trusting me with her journal. You earned it. You're doing exactly what she hoped someone would do. After Emily left, Sarah sat holding the journal, feeling the weight of inheritance she hadn't asked for but couldn't refuse. Emma leaned against her shoulder. We're keeping Dr. Reeves' promise. We're trying. That's the same thing, basically. Sarah kissed her daughter's hair, this philosopher who kept finding hope in obligations others might consider burdens. 2 months passed in steady progress. Construction timelines extended across weeks, slowed by permits and weather, and the usual friction between vision and execution. But concrete and steel rose anyway in neighborhoods that needed them most. By June, 2 warming stations stood complete. Marcus organized soft openings without ceremony, wanting to test systems before official announcements. Sarah visited both, offering operational advice based on months of managing the original vehicle. The stations felt different, more permanent, and less personal, but they worked. People came, stayed warm, left safer than they had arrived. The mathematics of mercy scaled better than she'd expected. Richard Hayes appeared at one of the stations during Sarah's visit. She tensed automatically before remembering he'd promised support rather than opposition. Impressive, he observed, looking around at the efficient space. Your prototype's getting children. Dr. Reeves' prototype. I'm just the keeper. Keeper who figured out how to turn it into public infrastructure. Don't diminish that. He handed her an envelope. Donation as promised, 10,000. Use it however the program needs. Sarah took the envelope, surprised by the weight of it. Thank you. I'm also donating office space in my new building, opens next month. Ground floor unit, 1,500 square feet. Figured you could use administrative headquarters as the program expands. Why? He considered the question seriously. Because I spent 40 years building things for profit, made good money, helped economy, employed people, all legitimate. But watching what you've built reminded me that sometimes the goal should be impact instead of income. Call it late life education. They shook hands, formerly opposed parties, now cautiously allied through shared recognition that helping people transcended property disputes. Summer arrived with the aggressive optimism only June could muster. The vehicle saw less use as temperatures rose, but community gatherings continued. Walter organized movie nights, projecting films onto the inner wall. Emma hosted book clubs for children her age, discussing stories with the seriousness of scholars who hadn't yet learned cynicism. Sarah spent her days managing a program that grew faster than systems designed to contain it. Monthly reports to city officials, budget reconciliations, training volunteers, coordinating with Marcus's team on the next 4 warming stations approved for construction. The work felt real in ways office management never had, connected to outcomes she could see rather than metrics that only impressed executives. The vehicle itself continued operating at the community center, flagship of a fleet that didn't exist yet. Sarah managed scheduling now through actual software rather than Walter's handwritten notebook, though she kept the notebook anyway because some systems worked through trust rather than efficiency. Emma started school at a building close enough to walk to, revolutionary after months of distance learning interrupted by lack of internet. She made friends with the ease children possessed before life taught them suspicion. Brought them home sometimes, kids who looked at their modest apartment with the envy of those whose homes felt less stable. Rusty accepted his role as ambassador to 9-year-old diplomacy, allowing pets and ball throwing with the patience of someone finally receiving proper recognition. Lisa became not just colleague but friend, the rare kind who showed up with wine when bureaucracy got particularly dense and with silence when problems needed space instead of solutions. Frank remained steady presence, checking on systems with the dedication of someone protecting legacy for people he'd never meet. Winter released its grip reluctantly, offering false springs before admitting defeat. By March, temperatures rose enough that Sarah could open windows without immediately regretting it. The vehicle's usage declined naturally. People still came, but for community rather than survival. The young mother whose twins had slept safely through cold nights now brought cookies and helped organize supply donations. In August, Marcus approached Sarah with news that managed to sound both casual and momentous. Patent claim went through, official as of yesterday. You hold intellectual property rights to Dr. Reeves' heat cascade design. That's it? Just approved? Government moves slow except when it doesn't. City attorney expedited it. He showed her documentation thick enough to prove authenticity. Licensing agreement activates when Station 5 opens. First payment should process December. The money felt abstract until Sarah calculated what 40,000 yearly meant for someone who'd been counting quarters for gas 6 months earlier. It meant Emma's college fund. It meant Rusty's veterinary care without panic. It meant breathing room between surviving and living. That evening, she updated the Reeves journal, adding her own entries beneath Elena's final one. Felt presumptuous at first, writing in someone else's book. But Emily had given it specifically for this, creating dialogue between past intention and present execution. August 15th, current year, 4 warming stations operating, 6 more in development. Last month, we served 847 people. Your technology works, Dr. Reeves. Better than you probably imagined when you hid Unit 5 in that warehouse. Frank told me you believed innovation should serve communities. It does. It is. Thank you for being brave when it mattered. Autumn arrived, temperatures dropping again toward necessity. Station usage increased predictably, systems performing reliably through cold nights that a year ago would have meant suffering. Sarah visited each location weekly, taking notes and offering adjustments and bearing witness to the fact that Elena's defiance 20 years ago had created warmth in the present for people whose names she'd never known, but whose needs she'd understood completely. The city scheduled a dedication ceremony for November, marking the completion of the 8th warming station and official recognition of the Community Resilience Initiative as permanent program. Sarah argued against the ceremony initially, uncomfortable with celebration that felt like making poverty decorative. But Lisa insisted. People need to see what working looks like. They need proof that government can partner with citizens to solve problems. Let them see it. The ceremony took place on a Tuesday morning that threatened snow but delivered only cold. The largest warming station, positioned near downtown services, where need concentrated most visibly, had been held for this moment. Reporters gathered, cameras positioning themselves for angles that would translate policy into human interest. Mayor attended, offering remarks that managed to sound both heartfelt and poll-tested. Marcus spoke about innovation and efficiency. Lisa discussed community partnerships. Walter represented users, speaking with the teacher's gift for making complexity clear. Then Sarah stood at the podium, Emma beside her because separation felt wrong for this. She'd prepared remarks again, formal language that explained program metrics and thanked appropriate parties. But looking at the faces gathered, some she recognized from desperate mornings in the vehicle, others new but wearing the same expression of needing things to work, the formal words felt insufficient. She folded the paper into her pocket and spoke plainly. A year ago I was homeless, living in a car with my daughter pretending everything was fine while slowly freezing. I bought a vehicle at a city auction because it was big enough to live in and cheap enough to afford. She paused, letting that reality settle. What I found was something someone else had hidden because she believed people deserved better than what systems were willing to provide. Dr. Elena Reeves built technology designed to keep families safe during crisis. When bureaucracy tried to erase it, she committed an act of professional rebellion and saved one vehicle. Cameras documented everything, which Sarah ignored. That act of defiance created this. 8 warming stations, more coming, hundreds of people safe through cold nights. Technology serving humanity the way it was always meant to. None of this happened because of me. It happened because DeReeves was brave, and Frank Garrett was as patient, and Lisa Brennan and Marcus Wade fought bureaucracy until it cooperated. Because Walter and dozens of others said this mattered enough to fight for. She looked at Emma, then back at the crowd. If you take anything from this ceremony, take this. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to accept that cruelty is inevitable. Sometimes you hide the good thing instead of destroying it. Sometimes you open your door when everyone else closes theirs. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, that stubbornness becomes something larger than your own survival. She stepped back. Emma grabbed her hand. The crowd applauded, some enthusiastically, others thoughtfully. The mayor approached after, shaking hands with practiced efficiency, while photographers captured civic virtue in action. But the moment Sarah remembered later came after the official ceremony ended. An elderly woman, someone she didn't recognize, approached carefully. You don't know me. I'm nobody official. But last winter, my grandson stayed at one of your stations for 3 weeks. He was between jobs, between homes, between any kind of hope. Your program kept him alive long enough to find work. He's housed now, employed. Still struggling, but alive to struggle. The woman's voice cracked. I wanted to thank you. Wanted you to know it matters. What you did, it matters. Sarah accepted the thanks with the grace of someone who understood that gratitude often carried more weight than celebration. After the woman left, Frank appeared with coffee that tasted burnt but served its purpose. Elena would have hated this ceremony, he observed. Probably. But she would have loved what it represents, would have stood right here crying and pretending she wasn't. They stood together, watching the station fill with its first occupants. People carrying bags in exhaustion and the fragile hope that maybe tonight would be bearable. The heating system hummed, descended from Elena's original design but adapted for permanence. The ceremony concluded with refreshments that involved cakes shaped like a building, which Emma found hilarious and Rusty found delicious when guards weren't watching. Richard Hayes attended, bringing his development team, the kind of gesture that acknowledged past conflict while choosing present cooperation. That evening, Sarah returned to the original vehicle at the community center. A knock came as she was preparing to close up. A young woman, maybe 25, stood outside holding a toddler bundled against the cold. Her eyes carried exhaustion Sarah recognized from mirrors. "Excuse me, is this the place? The warm place?" Sarah stepped aside. "Yes, come in." The woman entered cautiously, child clutched tight. "I'm Jennifer. This is Lucas. We've been in my car for 2 weeks. The shelters are full, and he keeps crying from the cold. And I just—" Her voice broke. Sarah helped her settle onto the bench, wrapped blankets around them both. Lucas stopped crying almost immediately, the warmth performing its quiet miracle. Jennifer closed her eyes, tears sliding silently. "I know exactly how you feel. I was where you are 6 months ago." "How did you get out?" Sarah pulled out Lisa's card. "This coordinator will connect you with housing assistance, services, everything available. It's not perfect, but it's something." Jennifer took the card like it was precious rather than paper. "Will it work? Does this actually help?" Sarah thought about bureaucracy and luck and the thin line between catastrophe and survival. About Elena's defiance and Frank's patience and all the small acts that accumulated into something larger than their parts. It doesn't fix everything, but it's better than nothing, and sometimes better than nothing is enough to build on. When Jennifer left with Hope and Lisa's card, Sarah pulled out Dr. Reeves' journal one last time. November 7th, current year. Met Jennifer today. Young mother, homeless, scared. Saw myself in her eyes. The cycle continues, but now there's infrastructure to catch people when they fall. 8 stations operational. Your rebellion succeeded, De Reeves. Your refusal to accept that compassion was optional, created a system that remembers people matter. Thank you for hiding Unit 5. Thank you for believing someone would find it and use it right. We did. We are. We will. She locked up and walked home through streets that were cold but no longer threatening. The warming stations aglowed across the city, small lights against large darkness. Not enough to eliminate suffering, but enough to make survival possible while working towards something better. Sarah reached her building, climbed stairs to the second floor, unlocked the door to stability she'd stopped expecting but learned to trust. Emma called out greeting. Rusty barked welcome. Warmth enveloped her, different than the vehicle's engineered comfort, but connected to it through the thread of believing that better was possible even when circumstances suggested otherwise. She was home. They were safe. And tomorrow more people would be safe because Elena had been brave and Sarah had been desperate enough to buy a strange vehicle and generous enough to share what she'd found. The light stayed on, it always would. That was the promise, the stubborn insistence that some things mattered more than convenience or profit or bureaucratic preference. And sometimes if you refused to destroy the good thing, someone found it eventually and used it exactly as intended. It was enough. And enough, Sarah had learned, was its own kind of victory when you'd survived on nothing long enough to recognize the difference.